Dean Martin vanished without a trace on March 15, 1973, leaving his Beverly Hills mansion in the middle of the night, with nothing but the clothes on his back, sparking the most intensive celebrity manhunt in Hollywood history, and revealing a secret so devastating that when he finally reappeared 72 hours later, he was a completely different man who would never speak about those missing days, proving that sometimes the biggest stars carry the heaviest burdens, and that 3 days can change everything you thought you knew about someone. It was Thursday, March 15, 1973, and Dean Martin was supposed to be at Capitol Records by 10 a.m. to begin recording his new album, Once in a While, a collection of romantic ballads that was expected to be his biggest commercial success in years. The session had been scheduled for months, with a full 30-piece orchestra booked, backup singers arranged, and Studio A reserved at enormous expense. Dean was known for his professionalism and had never missed a recording session in his 20-year career with the label. The recording session represented more than just another album for Dean. At age 55, he was entering a new phase of his career, having recently signed a lucrative 5-year contract with Capitol Records that would guarantee his financial security well into retirement. The album was intended to showcase Dean's maturing vocal abilities and his evolution from a nightclub entertainer into a sophisticated recording artist. When Dean failed to appear by 11 a.m., his producer, Jimmy Bowen, assumed there had been a scheduling mix-up or traffic delay. Dean was famously laid back about time, often arriving fashionably late to social events, though he was usually punctual for professional commitments. Bowen called Dean's Beverly Hills home, but got no answer, which wasn't unusual since Dean often let his answering service handle calls during the day. The orchestra musicians, who were being paid substantial hourly rates, began growing restless as the delay extended beyond an hour. Bowen found himself in the awkward position of trying to keep 30 professional musicians occupied while attempting to locate his missing star. The studio time alone was costing Capitol Records over $500 per hour, not including the musicians' fees and other production costs. By noon, Bowen was concerned enough to call Dean's manager, Mort Viner, who immediately tried reaching Dean at home, at his country club, and through his usual network of friends and associates. No one had seen or heard from Dean since the previous evening, when he had attended a quiet dinner at Chasen's restaurant with his longtime friend and frequent golf partner, businessman Robert Sterling. Sterling told Viner that Dean had seemed perfectly normal during their dinner, discussing upcoming projects and making plans for their regular Saturday golf game at Riviera Country Club. Dean had appeared relaxed and in good spirits, showing no signs of distress or unusual behavior that might have indicated he was planning to disappear or that he was facing any kind of crisis. During their dinner, Dean had talked enthusiastically about his upcoming recording session and had mentioned plans for a possible television special later in the year. Sterling noticed that Dean seemed particularly optimistic about his career prospects and was looking forward to the creative challenges that lay ahead. By 2 p.m., when Dean still hadn't appeared at the studio and wasn't answering his phone, Viner decided to drive to Dean's Beverly Hills mansion to check on him personally. What he found there launched one of the most mysterious and frightening episodes in entertainment history. Dean's house was empty, but everything appeared normal at first glance. The front door was locked, the security system was activated, and there were no signs of forced entry or struggle. Dean's 3 cars were all in the garage. His wallet containing over $800 in cash was on his bedroom dresser, and his clothes were hanging undisturbed in his walk-in closet. But when Viner looked more carefully, he noticed disturbing details that suggested something was very wrong. Dean's bed hadn't been slept in, though the covers were rumpled as if someone had been sitting on the edge. A half-finished glass of his favorite scotch sat on the bedside table, and Dean's reading glasses were lying on the floor beside the bed as if they had been dropped suddenly. Most mysteriously, Dean's front door was unlocked from the inside, despite the security system being activated. The only way this could have happened was if Dean had left voluntarily, but had somehow managed to engage the security system after leaving the house, which was technically impossible with the sophisticated system Dean had installed following several celebrity break-ins in the neighborhood. The security system showed no record of being deactivated during the night, and there were no signs that anyone had tampered with the electronic controls. This technological impossibility baffled investigators and suggested that Dean's disappearance involved knowledge of security systems that went far beyond what a typical kidnapper would possess. Viner immediately called the Beverly Hills Police Department, who arrived within 20 minutes and began a preliminary investigation. The officers were initially skeptical that a crime had been committed, suggesting that Dean might have gone away for a few days without telling anyone, which wasn't unusual for celebrities who valued their privacy. But as the investigation continued, more disturbing evidence emerged. Dean's housekeeper, Elena Vasquez, who had worked for Dean for over 10 years, told police that she had never known him to leave without informing her or making arrangements for the house. Dean was a creature of habit who always left detailed instructions when he traveled, including contact information and expected return dates. More significantly, Elena revealed that she had found a strange note in Dean's handwriting on the kitchen counter that morning. The note said simply, "I have to fix something that can't be fixed any other way. Don't look for me." The note was written on Dean's personal stationery and was definitely in his handwriting, but the phrasing was unlike anything Dean had ever written before. By evening on March 15th, word of Dean's disappearance had leaked to the media, and reporters were gathering outside his Beverly Hills home. The story made national news by the 11 p.m. broadcasts, with speculation ranging from kidnapping to voluntary disappearance to possible suicide. Frank Sinatra, who had been in New York when Dean disappeared, flew back to Los Angeles immediately and joined the search efforts. Despite their complicated relationship following their 1966 fight, Frank was genuinely concerned about Dean's welfare and used his connections to mobilize additional resources for finding his former partner. "Dean might be mad at me, but he wouldn't just vanish like this," Frank told reporters. "Something's wrong, and we need to find him before it's too late." The FBI was called in on March 16th, when initial police investigations failed to turn up any leads. Special Agent Robert Kellerman, who specialized in missing persons cases involving high-profile individuals, took charge of the federal investigation and immediately expanded the search nationwide. Agent Kellerman's first breakthrough came when he discovered that Dean had made a mysterious phone call at 11:47 p.m. on March 14th, just hours before his disappearance. The call had been placed from Dean's home phone to a number in Chicago that belonged to a private detective named Vincent "Vinny" Torino. Torino was a former Chicago police officer who had built a reputation for handling sensitive cases involving organized crime figures and wealthy clients who needed problems solved discreetly. When federal agents contacted Torino, he initially claimed attorney-client privilege and refused to discuss his conversation with Dean. However, when pressed by FBI agents and faced with potential obstruction of justice charges, Torino eventually revealed that Dean had hired him 6 months earlier to investigate something related to Dean's past that had recently resurfaced and was threatening to destroy his career and reputation. Mr. Martin was terrified about something from his early days in show business, Torino told agents. He said someone was trying to blackmail him with information that would ruin everything he had built. He hired me to find out who was behind it and to try to stop them. Torino's investigation had led him to discover a network of individuals who claimed to have evidence that Dean Martin had been involved in illegal activities during his early career in the 1940s, before he became famous. The alleged evidence included financial records and witness statements that suggested Dean had been involved in money laundering operations connected to organized crime figures in Ohio and New York. According to Torino, Dean's blackmailers had recently escalated their demands, threatening to release the damaging information to the media unless Dean paid them $2 million by March 16, 1973. Dean had been agonizing over whether to pay the money or fight the allegations, knowing that either choice could destroy his career and reputation. "Mr. Martin called me that night in a panic," Torino explained to federal agents. He said he had decided he couldn't live with paying blackmail for the rest of his life, but he also couldn't let his family and friends be destroyed by false allegations. He said he was going to handle the situation himself, and he told me to stop my investigation immediately. This revelation changed the entire nature of the FBI investigation. Agents now suspected that Dean hadn't simply disappeared, but had gone to confront his blackmailers personally, which put him in extreme danger. The blackmailers had demonstrated that they were ruthless and well-organized, and Dean's decision to face them alone could have resulted in his kidnapping or murder. Agent Kellerman immediately began investigating the individuals identified by Torino's research, focusing on Anthony "Big Tony" Castellano, a Chicago-based criminal who had connections to both legitimate businesses and illegal operations. Castellano had allegedly been the mastermind behind the blackmail scheme, using forged documents and false witness statements to create the appearance that Dean had been involved in criminal activities decades earlier. On March 17th, 72 hours after Dean's disappearance, FBI agents received a tip that led them to an abandoned warehouse in downtown Los Angeles. Inside the warehouse, they found Dean Martin, alive but severely beaten and clearly traumatized by his ordeal. Dean was conscious and able to speak, but he was dehydrated, exhausted, and suffering from multiple injuries including facial bruises, cracked ribs, and what appeared to be cigarette burns on his arms. He was immediately taken to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center for treatment and evaluation. When federal agents interviewed Dean about his disappearance in captivity, he provided only limited information about what had happened during those 72 hours. Dean confirmed that he had gone to meet with his blackmailers in an attempt to resolve the situation permanently, but he refused to provide details about the specific events that had occurred during his captivity. "I went there to end this once and for all," Dean told Agent Kellerman, his voice hoarse and his hands trembling as he recounted the ordeal. "They wanted money I didn't have for crimes I didn't commit. I thought I could reason with them, but I was wrong. They kept me tied up for 3 days, trying to force me to sign financial documents that would have given them access to my accounts." Dean's physical injuries suggested that his captors had used systematic torture to try to coerce him into compliance. Medical examinations revealed that the cigarette burns were fresh and had been inflicted in a deliberate pattern, indicating a calculated campaign of abuse designed to break Dean's resistance. Dr. Michael Patterson, the emergency room physician who treated Dean, noted that the injuries were consistent with professional interrogation techniques. Mr. Martin showed signs of prolonged psychological trauma in addition to his physical injuries, Dr. Patterson reported to federal agents. The burn pattern suggested that his captors were experienced in using pain as a coercion tool. This wasn't random violence. It was methodical torture designed to extract compliance. Dean's wrists bore deep rope marks that indicated he had been bound for extended periods, and his ankles showed similar injuries. Bruising patterns on his torso suggested he had been beaten repeatedly, possibly with a wooden implement, like a baseball bat or police baton. Most disturbing were the psychological effects of his ordeal, which manifested in hypervigilance, insomnia, and an exaggerated startle response. According to the limited details Dean provided, his captors had held him in what appeared to be a soundproof basement room with no windows and only a single overhead light. They had allowed him minimal food and water, using hunger and thirst as additional tools of psychological control. Dean estimated that he had been given only one small meal per day and limited water, weakening his physical resistance while maintaining his consciousness. The torture sessions had apparently occurred at regular intervals, with his captors alternating between physical abuse and psychological manipulation. They had played recordings of his own songs at high volume for hours at a time, turning his own music into an instrument of torture that created lasting trauma associations with his professional identity. "They knew exactly how to hurt me," Dean told Agent Kellerman in a moment of candor. "They used my own voice against me, played my songs until I couldn't stand to hear them anymore. They wanted to break not just my body, but my spirit, to destroy everything that made me who I was." However, Dean steadfastly refused to identify his captors or provide information that would help federal agents arrest them. He insisted that the matter was resolved and that he didn't want to pursue criminal charges or continue the investigation in any way. This refusal puzzled and frustrated investigators, who suspected that Dean might still be under threat from his captors. "It's over," Dean told agents repeatedly, though his trembling hands and haunted expression suggested otherwise. "I can't get those 3 days back, but I can move forward. I don't want my family dragged through a public trial about things that happened before they were even born." Agent Kellerman suspected that Dean's refusal to cooperate stemmed from continuing threats against his family members. The sophistication of the blackmail scheme and torture techniques suggested that Dean's captors were part of a larger criminal organization with the resources to carry out long-term revenge against those who crossed them. The FBI was frustrated by Dean's refusal to cooperate, but they couldn't force him to press charges or provide testimony. Without Dean's cooperation, they had insufficient evidence to build a case against Castellano and his associates, who had apparently destroyed any evidence of the blackmail scheme and Dean's captivity. Dean's return home was kept secret from the media for several days while he recovered from his injuries and tried to process the trauma of his experience. When he finally made a public appearance a week later, he claimed that he had been suffering from exhaustion and had taken a few days of rest at a private medical facility. The official story released to the press was that Dean had experienced a minor breakdown due to work stress and had sought treatment at a confidential location. No mention was made of blackmail, kidnapping, or the violent ordeal he had endured during his 72-hour disappearance. However, those closest to Dean noticed that he was fundamentally changed by whatever had happened during those missing days. Friends and family members observed that Dean became more withdrawn and cautious, avoiding situations where he might be vulnerable and seeming constantly alert to potential threats. Dean's daughter, Dina Martin, later revealed that her father had developed severe claustrophobia following his disappearance, refusing to enter elevators or small enclosed spaces without visible distress. He had also begun experiencing nightmares and would check door locks multiple times before bed. "Dad was never the same after those 3 days," Dina said in a 1995 interview. "He installed additional security systems and was always looking over his shoulder, as if he expected someone to grab him at any moment." Dean's professional relationships also changed significantly after his disappearance. He became more selective about his projects, turning down opportunities that required extensive travel or unfamiliar situations. He refused all international bookings and canceled a planned European tour. He also began employing private security for the first time in his career, hiring former FBI agents who maintained discreet surveillance of his activities. These bodyguards accompanied him to public events and provided 24-hour security at his home. Most significantly, Dean's performance style became noticeably different. The relaxed entertainer who had charmed audiences was replaced by someone more guarded and less spontaneous. The effortless charisma that had defined his career was diminished by underlying tension he could never completely hide. Musicians who worked with Dean noted that he had difficulty concentrating during recording sessions and would become agitated if sessions ran longer than planned. He insisted on having multiple exit routes identified in any venue where he performed. "Dean used to be the most relaxed guy in show business," said pianist Bill Miller, who had worked with Dean for over 15 years. After 1973, he was always on edge. The music was still there, but the joy was gone. Whatever happened during those 3 days had stolen something essential from his spirit. The true story of Dean's 72-hour disappearance remained one of Hollywood's most closely guarded secrets for decades. Dean never spoke publicly about what had really happened, and the few people who knew the truth were sworn to secrecy through loyalty to Dean and fear of criminal elements. It wasn't until the 1990s, years after Dean's death, that some details of the blackmail scheme and kidnapping began to emerge through FBI files released under the Freedom of Information Act. Even then, many crucial details remained classified or redacted, leaving significant gaps in the public's understanding of what Dean had endured. Anthony Castellano was eventually arrested on unrelated charges in 1975 and died in federal prison in 1983, taking his secrets about Dean's ordeal to the grave. Other individuals connected to the blackmail scheme either disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances, ensuring that the full truth about Dean's 72 hours in captivity would never be revealed. Dean's closest friend during his later years, businessman Robert Sterling, observed that Dean never fully recovered from whatever had happened during his disappearance. Dean was never the same after those 3 days, Sterling revealed in a 1990 interview. He would never talk about what happened, but you could see it in his eyes. He had seen something or experienced something that changed how he looked at the world. The carefree guy we all knew was gone, replaced by someone who was always looking over his shoulder. The 3 days that Dean Martin spent in the hands of his captors changed him forever, transforming one of America's most beloved entertainers into a more cautious and guarded person who could never again take his safety and security for granted. The experience served as a brutal reminder that fame offers no protection from those willing to use extreme violence to achieve their goals, and that even legends can be broken by secrets too dangerous to reveal. If this story of mystery, danger, and the hidden costs of fame moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with anyone who needs to understand that celebrity success often comes with threats and dangers that the public never knows about, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is survive in silence. Have you ever wondered what celebrities really face behind the glamour? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible stories about the hidden dangers, dark secrets, shocking mysteries, untold truths, and secrets of Hollywood's golden age.